Welcome back to part 2 of Far Less on the Rumors Are True podcast. Yeah.
Within weeks, it's been a long time, but it's 20 years now. Within weeks, we worked out the details.
I think we went, Joseph, I think that we went after we all played our gigs that day. There were several bands who were kind of in negotiation with Tooth and Nail. And there was something at the time, it transitioned into this tour that we'll talk about a little later, the Youngbloods thing.
Yes.
But it was, so at the time, Josh Scoggins, I think, he was not singing for Norma Jean. He had made the Chariot. And to be completely transparent, I didn't listen to Norma Jean. I didn't know anything really about that. That wasn't what I was into. But we knew he is legend. And I feel like we all, and correct me if I'm wrong, went to a Pizza Hut. I think we went to a Pizza Hut with Chad, and I thought John, and Far Less, he is legend. I want to say Showbread, and I want to say As Cities, but maybe not everybody went. Ended up being on that tour that we'll talk about, but we all went to this Pizza Hut, and I remember some vague memory of a record deal, like saying, okay, we're going to offer you after seeing us play live. Then we're going to move ahead with this now. Like this is the thing that we feel comfortable moving ahead with. But there was a discussion, probably not at the dinner table at Pizza Hut, but there was a discussion of where does Far Less fit? Is this a Solid State band or is this a Tooth and Nail?
Yeah. Were you guys on both for some reason?
We weren't. We were Tooth and Nail.
It became our choice because it was right then when heavier bands were really transitioning to Solid State, and I remember it being like a conversation, and Under Oath was the first one that did a dual, like a Solid State / Tooth and Nail release, and we were kind of going to be the next one, but by the time it all shook out, we ended up just doing Tooth and Nail.
And I can't remember who else did both. Fast Cities Burn maybe did both, or Showbread.
I think they might have too. Actually,
maybe did both.
I think might have.
Yeah. So we just did Tooth and Nail, but then we wrote Everyone Is Out to Get Us, which was heavier than anything we had ever done. So we don't know that we regretted it because it's really the same thing. It's not
sure,
And so we were on Tooth and Nail, but we did the Youngbloods of Solid State tour. But I want to back up for just a second. So Broken Hearts Unite was a pivotal moment for us as a young band. But one reason was because before we recorded that album, we had a member join the band, Mark Karsten. So Jordan, right. I think the summer before that, Jordan, and you probably have heard this term come up a couple times. Jordan worked at a Young Life camp.
Okay.
With Mark Karsten. They were best buds at Young Life, and I didn't go to that camp that summer, but I've went to a couple Young Life camps. And Jordan and Mark bonded so much over music that he went home to Arkansas, I don't know, for a couple months, and then drove to Virginia and joined the band. And he recorded guitar on Broken Hearts Unite, and he lived in Virginia for the next 10 years.
Yeah, he was in the band for the duration of our time with Tooth and Nail, for sure. And on all those albums, he would have played guitar on Turn to the Bright. And that stuff. So we signed. So sometime, and I will say, I don't think that we had actually signed, like on pen and paper, our deal with Tooth and Nail until sometime into that Youngbloods tour. So I think they were tossing around the idea of doing that tour at the Pizza Hut.
That's what it was, because we signed when we were in Los Angeles and Derek Tenbush came out. We signed the contracts with Derek.
So the Cornerstone thing, I think, was that they had been spinning this idea of having the Chariot headline a tour and taking all these bands that they had signed around the same time out together on a tour, which ended up happening pretty shortly after. I want to say it was the fall after that Cornerstone. Am I right, Joseph? It was like a few months after the Cornerstone. Then they put this Tooth and Nail Solid State tour together, but it's all brand new bands. There's nobody on there that's not a brand new band.
Sure.
Leaning very heavily on the fact that Josh from Norma Jean had a following, because we saw the Chariot at Cornerstone, and when they played, they were the band. They were the band that anybody knew who they were. That ended up being on that tour. And, you know, we might have played Cornerstone's great and there were all kinds of people watching your band, but you're a new band. Nobody knows who you are.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's this new band but everybody knows who they are. Like they're a brand new band and everybody at the whole thing is excited to see Josh doing the Chariot and it was bananas. I remember it being kind of like off the wall, how much energy there was in the tent when they played. And then there's this discussion about doing this tour. And I don't want to speak for anybody else that was in Far Less at the time, because we always had an up and down dynamic about touring. It was it was a thing. You know, it was certainly a thing that led to people leaving the group, and it more so than anything else led to major disagreements and in what direction we were to take the band. I can say that I was always in the direction of Tooth and Nail. That was like when it came up, it was okay. I want to do this. I saw May. I was stoked on them. I was stoked on the bands. We saw the success of Under Oath, and we saw the success of MXPX and some of these other bands. It made a lot of sense. But I don't think that everybody else in the band was always on the same page, 100% behind the move. But we can touch on some of that stuff later. But anyway, I digress.
So once you guys signed, you obviously put out the Turn to the Bright EP pretty quickly, as you mentioned. Let's briefly talk about that, and then let's go into Everyone Is Out to Get Us record. Let's just kind of maybe your thoughts looking back on those the EP and the full length.
Cool. I'll jump in here. So, yeah, Turn to the Bright EP was just. It happens a lot, I think, where you first sign to a label. They need to get something out because they want to get you on. You want to be on tour, but you just don't have enough songs to do a full length. So, that's what Turn to the Bright kind of turned into. It was with Jamie King. It was quick. It's actually only 4 songs with an intro and outro. So it's 6 tracks, intro, 4 songs, outro. I like it. I mean, I can still put it on and listen to it. There were some really interesting songs. I remember what we did at the time. We had some friends that had a cabin, and we went and lived together for like 2 or 3 weeks in our friend's cabin and kind of wrote that EP, and jumped down and recorded it with Jamie. It was all very quick. And it was establishing kind of a vibe for our band at the time. You know, we had done a full length together. Ray, we were all out of high school. We were in college. We were kind of like, actually by this time we were probably leaving. I think I had left in the middle of a semester. We were kind of like dropping out of college.
Yeah, I mean, I had 1 semester left to graduate from college, but a record deal in front of me, so I was like, I'm going to do that instead.
Totally, I get it.
And and so just because as we're about to talk about Everyone Is Out to Get Us, and we'll talk about who produced it and stuff, but you know, we kind of don't want to gloss over this. We were loving life as a regional band, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, South Carolina. But right then, as Silent Uproar was showing us the tooth and nail, we were becoming more than a regional band. We weren't touring a lot, but we were doing these extended weekends and going to Florida all the time, and you're going north and south, and
sure.
We really became really great friends with a lot of Orlando bands. So Far Less always had we were from Blacksburg, right? But Greensboro became a home to us. Orlando became, we always had these centers that were very special to us. So we started playing with several bands, Jordan in Orlando,
School for Heroes for sure, School for Heroes,
and Beneath These Words, and I think Adrian from School for Heroes, Jeremy.
Oh yeah, I love Adrian. Yeah,
Adrian's great. And then we kind of met School for Heroes through Swift, and
we went out and saw them or played a gig with them at Ziggy's or something. And
they were larger than life. They were these regional talents that their skills and abilities in songwriting and playing were national. Like they all talked to major labels. And then Minus Driver, the formerly Minus from Atlanta, they changed their name to Minus Driver because there's like an Icelandic band, Minus. They were another band in that scene. They actually put an EP out on maybe on Universal.
Warner Brothers. I think it was Universal or Warner.
It was fantastic. And as we get into the next full length, their bassist Lee March produced it. So we were just, we were just wanted to be friends, and we weren't a big party band or anything, but we were a hang band. We were like a hangout band. Like we just wanted to make friends with our bros and rock out. No matter if you were like a rock band or a hardcore band or a indie band or whatever it was. So I just want to give a shout out to Orlando, because we became, we would go down there and play with Hand to Hand, and then we would tour through, and they would be on tour, and we'd play with Beneath These Words, and Jay from Hand to Hand ended up joining the Almost, right?
Oh, nice.
And then Alex from Beneath These Words, Emo Alex played bass in the Almost. We never played with the Almost, but we knew, and Dusty was in the Almost.
Yeah,
after
we knew all those guys.
Yeah, and after what's the other band Dusty was in?
Dusty was in Dead Poetic also.
Dead Poetic, yeah. We played with them some. So that brings us all back around to Turn to the Bright EP, which, like I said, it's a very cool, very short EP.
I went and saw Dusty's new band last week, by the way, Crenshaw. They're Crenshaw Pentecostal.
Oh yeah, my friend Jeremy plays with them too.
Oh yeah, they were great.
Yeah.
Sorry, Joseph.
That's awesome. Yeah. So no, Turn to the Bright was like in 2004, and then we did Youngbloods, and we toured fairly extensively. Youngbloods of Solid State was our first national tour.
That was the first big thing we ever did. That was the first thing where we would go out
and shows, but it was the first. Yeah.
Yeah.
What were the shows like? Were they bombers?
On the Youngbloods tour, they were all like. So I will say we released Turn to the Bright. We probably actually put our names down on paper somewhere during that tour, like Joseph said, in Los Angeles. I think we were playing at the Chain Reaction. And everything was sold out or selling out. Everything we played. It was the first time that we had played, a month or 6 weeks or whatever on the road. And we were opening every night, or were we tossing it back and forth with us and As Cities Burn? But I think we were mainly, maybe they opened up.
It was half the dates we opened and half the dates As Cities Burn opened. And then, just for anybody else that doesn't know, this is obviously coming up on 20 years ago, but that was it's us, As Cities Burn, right when they hadn't while we were on tour, they released Son, I Love You.
I Love You. Yeah.
I think everybody put their records out while we were on that tour.
Yep. Showbread, and then Showbread. Actually, Showbread and He Is Legend
would swap off,
swap direct support, and then the Chariot. And so in retrospect, thinking about the lineup, then that was really a tour for the ages. I mean, this was
totally
like early Chariot. It was his original Chariot lineup. Obviously, I think he had a different lineup for most record cycles after that, but these young guys were, the wildest stage show you've ever seen.
Yeah, totally.
I booked them on.
Everybody's hopping on stage, the crowd going crazy.
This was He Is Legend doing I Am Hollywood when that was the only record they had.
Yeah, I booked them at that time too. That was nuts.
I will remember forever watching He Is Legend go from having their EP that they had to putting that record out, and watching their crowds. It was like surge within a week. It was like, and I would like to say this. We may have put Turn to the Bright out about halfway through that tour. I think it was probably imperative that we had something new out on Tooth and Nail.
Yeah.
And they were pushing that pretty hard. We may have been, it probably should have, in retrospect, spent a little more time on our deal. Some of the guys in the band would have said that we should have spent more time on the deal, but I pushed pretty hard. We need a record out on this tour. We're out here. They have it pretty much cocked and loaded and ready to go. And we're watching all of these other guys and these other bands release their records. And then everybody is, going crazy for them at these shows. I think As Cities Burn, He Is Legend, Showbread, and the Chariot all released records either right before the tour or during the tour. And the energy for all of their shows was crazy every time. And I'm not saying that it wasn't good for us too. We were a little late to the game putting something out. I don't think we necessarily, not that all those bands sound the same, they don't, but they may have fit a mold a little differently than we did.
Sure.
I do think that was a great thing for us to do. It was getting our feet wet. We were playing for huge crowds every night, but this, I will say the stars of the show were probably the other bands, in that they had records that were tracking or at least hitting and moving forward And we were a little late to the game with that. And ours was an EP, and all of theirs were full lengths, and they were getting like the full support from the record labels
I get
at
it.
the time. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Yeah.
It's our first national tour. We made friends for life. Who are your top 3 or 4 bros coming out of that tour?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's a tough one. We've always have valued our friendship with He Is Legend. We knew those guys ahead of time. So I'm not going to even mention the He Is Legend guys because we were friends with them anyway. Probably connected really well with Cody from As Cities Burn. I feel like he and I kind of, I haven't talked to Cody in a very long time, but always have many fond memories of Cody as a person and especially as especially as a person, but as a songwriter and a guitar player, completely unique, tonally just killer. I think he and I connected pretty well. I want to say that I connected with the Chariot guys. Probably had the longest lasting connection with Keller, who I will still talk to from time to time, and Beiser and Taco. I remember I haven't talked to those guys in a long time, but and then the Showbread guys, I want to say John. I think John was the guy that I connected with the most. He was the guitar.
I booked them a couple of times. He was so funny.
John's the greatest, and he just felt like an older brother. Not that back then anybody who was like a year older than you felt way older, but he was barely older than me at all. But John was my dude, and can't go without saying Mackenzie from He Is Legend.
Yeah, Mackenzie.
Oh man, rest in peace.
Yeah, no, totally. That was a devastating thing with Mackenzie.
Keller and Bowser, and then As Cities Burn.
Colin also with As Cities Burn.
I love Colin. Colin's a homie for sure. He's hilarious.
Colin's the best. And then I don't know if you guys remember Beiser from. I'm sorry, not Beiser. Pascal from.
Pascal.
The first bass player.
He's on commercials now.
He's the Safe Light guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, and I don't know if he's doing it as. I think he still works for them, but he does so much with vintage and antique cars now. He's like,
oh, that's cool.
He rebuilds them and builds classic cars. He's really great at it.
Everybody was extremely friendly and cool. I don't remember ever really connecting with everybody on it, but there were also 5 bands. Yeah. And there were so many of us, but the venues all treated us well. I remember going through Seattle and, Tooth and Nail having a big cookout they had a couple different locations. This would have been at their first one or certainly the first one that we went to. I don't know how many different places they had, but do you remember going through there and having a cookout with them? And then we all went and watched, a movie, maybe. Do you remember? We all they took us out for it's like you'd think of record labels taking bands out to dinner and drinks, and certainly that kind of stuff happened a little later on. But for that day, I think it was dinner and a movie and ice creams afterwards. Cool. It was like the Tooth and Nail taking their bands out for ice cream.
But then it all came out. It was all it came out of our record sales.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
We all got to raid the warehouse. I remember and just grab one of our CDs, which is nice because you get exposure to some of the stuff, some of the Tooth and Nail stuff you didn't really know. But that was the first time playing so many of the cities and venues out west.
Yes, that was the first time we ever went out west. It was the first time, and it was we were playing for, like we said, huge crowds on that.
And it was a van tour. There were no buses. So although I think the Chariot probably could have, by the time it was all said and done, probably could have afforded to be on a bus for that tour, it was still a van tour.
Yeah. It was routed. Everything was routed pretty close together. There was none of this it
was van routed, so it was tight. We can move on from this, but I have one standout from that tour, Jordan, and that's when the Youngbloods of Solid State tour crossed. We ended up crossing tours with Acceptance.
Oh yeah, Diplomatic.
No, it was Diplomatic.
I think they were on that too.
Panic Division. Yeah, whatever tour package they had, we crossed and we did 3 shows together. We did.
Wow.
It was in New Jersey.
Yeah, there were like 8 bands on it. 8 bands. We played in Philadelphia. We played somewhere in New Jersey, and we played somewhere else. Yeah, and
First Unitarian Church in Philly. That's a standout show for me because it was our tour package plus that Acceptance tour, and
Acceptance were like mighty. I love.
I was a fan of Acceptance. That's right when they were there was before Phantoms. They had put out maybe an EP, and they were playing with like Coheed and bands, and we kind of became friends with them in 3 days. And I think their drummer's name was Nick, and we had a hoodie back then that had Al Capone on it, and I remember we'd always do merch trades, and we traded hoodies with Acceptance.
That's awesome.
I mean, First Unitarian Church was just one of the best, coolest non-venue venues in the country.
Definitely.
Still putting on fantastic shows.
Sweet.
But
that's sweet. Well, let's touch on Everyone Is Out to Get Us. How soon after the EP comes out do you put that out, and maybe your thoughts looking back on that record and maybe the reception of it as well.
Yeah, well, okay. So we mentioned earlier Minus Driver, and we had connected with those guys as friends, and we were big fans of their band. They had done a record on, like I said, we think it was Universal. They recorded with like Andy Wallace or Matt Wallace, and it was like sounded like $1 million. And so we were kind of talking with tooth and nail about who we were going to do a full length record with. We had a batch of songs. Probably 10 or 15 songs that we were going to pare down to probably 15 songs. We were going to bring it down to about 10. And Lee started talking to us. I don't know if we were probably considering some other more tooth and nail producers who have made more tooth and nail albums. And they probably wanted us they did. They wanted us to go in that direction. We were always we always were butting heads with that. We didn't want to, for whatever reason, we didn't want to fit the mold. It was not really our thing. I want to compliment Brandon and Ray, specifically for always steering us in a direction where we didn't allow ourselves to get stuck in a mold or a genre, so to speak, most especially with living in the tooth and nail solid state world. And I do not mean this with any disrespect to the bands, which could be a little samey though. We wanted to be different. We were striving to be different. And Brandon and Ray were always really pushing us in that direction.
Well, we were just striving to beve weren't really trying
but yeah, that's a better way to put it.
We could have gone. I'm sure we could have recorded with Aaron Sprinkle, or we could have. He as Legend had just gone and recorded with
Adam
from Killswitch.
Yeah. We talked to Lee, the bass player from Honest Driver. He had a home studio. We went and did some demos with him. That ended up we ended up doing some demos with him for the Turn to the Bright record, and then we went back and did demos with him again, and sent them to the label, and they signed off on it. And it was pretty quick. I mean, I think I remember we didn't court anybody. We didn't really have a long form conversation with any other producers. We were sold on Lee. I think they liked how the demos sounded. They were cool with him doing it. And so we went to down to Atlanta. It was actually Marietta, but we went down to Atlanta to the studio. I want to say Fight Paris had done. Lee had recorded a Fight Paris record, which I can't remember who released that, but somebody had there was some, amount of buzz about the record.
I think.
Yeah, there was some buzz about the record enough to where Tooth and Nail was like, all right, cool. He's in a band that's on a major label, the producer, and he's made a couple other records, and so they sound good. So we went and recorded, and it was a completely different experience than anything we had ever done. We lived in the studio, which was this like big mansion in Marietta with a studio with at the time we didn't really know, but there was like a big, huge Neve console, like a custom 75 or something down in the bottom of the down in the basement. But it was a completely different experience for us. We lived in the same place that we made a record, and there was a full bar in the basement. I was probably drinking from it every single day, cutting guitars down with just sitting with my feet up on the console or whatever. I just remember in thinking back to it, I wish that I would have had a better mentality about putting that album together.
Sure.
Not that I'm not happy with how it turned out, but I do think that it was, it was an interesting thing having 5 guys living in, or 6.
Well, yeah, and you're young.
People
I mean,
you're not kids, and
grown-ass adults,
we're younger guys, and we're living in the same place, and so either it's, I don't know. Joseph can touch on it.
We're struggling with our own financial issues and our own relationship issues, and what brought us together was the music, and so it was a great. I mean, I remember it being a great experience. I like the record. I think it sounds really good. It's my bass is louder on that record than any other recording, so that makes me happy. Of course, he's a bass player. But I mean, it's so silly. You think back on it, and you're like, Ray had a cracked cymbal, and none of us could afford to get another cymbal,
Sure.
and we're recording this reasonably budgeted record, and
we can't take $200 out of the budget to go and buy a new cymbal. Yeah. We don't have any more
none
money.
of us had Ray didn't have the money. Nobody had the money to do it. And it's silly. We should have been like tooth and nail, like we need a new cymbal, and eventually we all endorsed different companies, and Ray got a cymbal deal with Meinl, and that would have been a moot point. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, we all came together for that month or 6 weeks we were in this house and made a really fun and energetic album, which
when I look back on it, it's definitely a whirlwind to listen to it.
Sure.
It's not something that I would. When I think about that one in particular, that album in particular, I think to myself, I don't know how we wrote that. I don't think I would ever write that again. I'm glad that we wrote it. I'm glad that it got put out into the world. But if I tried to sit down and play some of that stuff, I could tell you right now, I would not know where to begin. There was a lot of counter intuition going on musically.
Ray was becoming and still was such a progressive drummer, so I felt like I was kind of trying to keep up with him sometimes as a bass player.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, Ray, and I want to give Ray Ray and Brandon both a lot of credit for that album, and Mark. I want to step outside of myself and give credit where it's due for that record sounding like it does. Those guys were very integral in making it different and thinking outside of the box and how it could be different arrangement wise and all this stuff. I mean, they were really step forward. And kind of sat in the producer chair along with Lee, and not saying that we didn't too. I mean, I think a lot of the ideas it was a cumulative effort with ideas, but the songs, when you listen back, they're, I don't know if I think of I looked at the Trap Ray, which is kind of in the middle of the record. It's like maybe the heaviest thing we ever did as a group. I don't know how we wrote that. Yeah, the Ghostbusters reference. I don't know how we wrote that song. I could not in a million years go and write that song again.
It sounds like Candiria meets Muse. I mean, the second half of the song is no screaming. It sounds like a different song completely.
Well, that's what Brandon was listening to,
It's a heavy album, but it actually, like Broken Hearts, it only has screaming on maybe 4 songs, Yeah. So the other songs are just rocking, just like rock songs.
And I think at that point in time, we're trying to figure out a lot of what is the band, where are we going, what are we doing with it?
Trying to find yourself. Yeah.
So we make that which again was a journey that we were always on, but we make this record, we put it out on Tooth and Nail, and then I think at that point in time, Joseph, we're in the middle of doing a lot of what I would call it's kind of like compound tours where a lot of bands are we're playing with other bands who maybe everybody can bring 20 people or 30 people or 50 people to a show.
Sure. Yeah,
we're playing a lot.
One's a hardcore band, one's an emo band, and you're bringing. And back then, the scene was just the scene. We're all friends together, except maybe Tough Guy Hardcore, and that's another. Yeah. But anyway, I want to hit on something you said, Jordan. We were trying to figure it out because coming off the only big tour we had done and seeing many things, many takeaways, right? The growth that He Is Legend, Showbread, and As Cities Burn made on that tour and having their full lengths being top of mind, and knowing that we have the opportunity to potentially see that jump in view in fans or whatever it may be, or record sales, but also trying to stay true to us. But we loved those records. We loved He Is Legend's first full length. Our Brandon was like dating one of the, like siblings of one of the guys in He Is Legend. They were our bros, but we never could cross over into that specific hardcore scene. Like we didn't want, there's something about the way we wrote, like we did not want to write the songs for hardcore dancing. Like that wasn't our thing. Like, and some of those, not to say
I thought it was silly. I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I even at the time, I thought that stuff was not ever gonna be for me.
We liked writing breakdowns, but we didn't specifically, hardcore wasn't the type of breakdown we were really doing.
You guys were a rock band. You guys were a rock band. Yeah.
And but we saw that. We saw the Chariot, like the sometimes the Chariot's fans just weren't super into what we were doing. Yeah. The As Cities Burns fans were, and He Is Legends fans were. So we were trying to write this record and be heavy, but not be hardcore. And by this time, we knew it was going to be a tooth and nail release and not a solid state release. So like we always had an identity, not an identity crisis, but because that became our identity,
Yeah.
So we always had such close fans that became friends. Like Broken Hearts Unite. We had so many friends that got the Broken Hearts Unite tattoo, the logo tattoo, like. And our shows, that's just what it became. Like it was called the FL Crew for life. I mean, because we would play like right at this time, we were coming off the heels of Solid State, playing with these bigger, heavy bands. But then not on tour, we became really good friends with this band Classic Case from New York.
Yeah.
So Classic Case was some guys from North Carolina that moved to New York, and they would come down and play with us in Virginia, and then they would play with Beloved in North Carolina. And then when Beloved disbanded, Josh Moore from Beloved ended up joining Classic Case. But we were playing with Classic Case. We were playing with Paulson from New Jersey, and they're like a dance pop emo rock band. We're playing with House of Fools, which is the guys
I got tickets to the Paulson reunion, brother. Throw that out there. I'm going to go see them.
Paulson reunion coming up.
I didn't even know they were playing. That's cool.
And so like we're like we want to be part of this tooth and nail solid state scene, but we're not a Christian band, but we love the dudes, but they're all in different parts of the country. But we're like, who are we going to play shows with? It's going to be our bros in House of Fools, who are like, they were on Drive Thru, but they weren't a Drive Thru. They were not a pop punk band, right?
Yeah, we identified with bands that were like, this is a funny thing. We identified a lot with bands who signed to record labels who sort of had a niche, but they were the outlier bands, and we were too.
Yeah, no, I get that.
And
Classic Case was the same way. I mean, they were just the most rocking. Like the first time they played with us in Blacksburg, they blew my mind. Like,
yeah, completely.
They came down from New York. It was Mitch and Jared were in Blank Face in the late 90s in North Carolina. They went to New York. They met, they met Glassjaw, and like Mitch played in Glassjaw for a hot minute, and Steph, their drummer, was in Sons of Abraham before Glassjaw with those guys, and then he left the band, and Daraja Lang played drums in Classic Case. And Daraja, then he joined Glassjaw after Classic Case, and he joined Saves the Day. Crazy. He and Manning were like a rhythm section dynamo. But anyway, so it was just, like without saying identity crisis, because like I said, that became our identity. We were just like, we're going to do what makes us happy as musicians and makes our fans happy, not necessarily trying. And it was a catch-22, I say.
Sure. I'm sure it was.
It was good. It was good, and I would say it was bad. We let's just say around this time we would like go play with He Is Legend for like a weekend in between tours, and we would be like, "Oh, who's this band opening for us? You guys are called The Devil Wears Prada." I thought that was a book about a movie or whatever, and then 3 months later they're 10 times bigger than we ever. They were the nicest dudes,
Yeah, watching all your peers around you, like, everybody has aspirations and goals, but that's a really good point, Joseph. You go and like somebody will be opening up for us, and fast forward 3, 4, 5 months ahead, the record comes out and they're headlining huge shows, and we're kind of at the same spot. We as far as attendance.
It was like Alice, like some of those bands are like Alisana in North Carolina. They got huge.
Yeah. Yep.
And they would come to our shows and talk to us and be buddies. And Red Jumpsuit Apparatus in Florida, like, and then Devil Wears Prada, and it's like, we wouldn't joke about it, but we could sit there and do these. We could have written the best like dancey breakdowns in the world, but that's not the kind of music we wanted to make. That's not what we grew up on.
Yeah.
We wanted to draw the influences from what we liked, and
how did that make you guys feel? Not you saying that. I mean, I'm sure you were stoked for your friends and these bands to do well, but how did that make you guys feel?
Well, I personally think that, obviously we felt good about it. I think we were also still I really want to speak from my own perspective, still trying to sort of chase something down. What is it that we can do without really trying to compromise too much about who we are and what we're trying to do. Though I do agree with my brother. It was a kind of a revolving door on what we ended up sounding like, but that, and those kinds of things probably did cause internal conflict to some degree. We did. I want to mention that on the Everyone Is Out to Get Us cycle, we toured a lot with our friends and Paulson and House of Fools and Classic, all these bands, and they were doing well. And we did these one-off dates, and we did some tours with He Is Legend. I can't remember if the Telescreen thing was at that time, Joseph, but we also did one, if I remember correctly, one really big national tour as an opener on that, and that was Amberlin and Emery.
Wow.
We did that. That was kind of
before that. The first big tour we did on that record cycle was 10 years.
Was that before that? I couldn't tell you.
That's
which was
the
which, but
tour I booked you guys off date from. I
was
think.
probably that would make sense. That was at that time.
I remember that now.
Yeah. Either way, whether it was with which one was first, I'm not sure, but we did a couple big national tours. One was with 10 Years. They had a song. We were direct support for that. Medina Lake were the opener.
Yep.
We did 4 to 6 weeks. So that tends to be what those national tours look like. But we were for the first time, either that tour or the Emery tour were following around a bus. So it becomes stressful and everything. We're not making any money. We're direct supporting. I think we played South by Southwest. It's a showcase for Tooth and Nail. We played with MXPX and Amberlin maybe or something. And the booking agent, I think it was Michael Arfin, who booked like Metallica and Linkin Park or so. He just so happens to walk by and see us play and calls our manager up, finds out who we are, calls our manager up. And the next thing we know, we're offered this tour with 10 Years. We knew who they were. They're on the radio. They have a huge #1 modern rock single. We go out on tour with them, but we're not making any money. Their fans were good. Their fans like the band. I do that kind of crossover to modern rock thing. We had some edgy. I think that was a good one for us, though we didn't, see much financially from that.
We played. Just to be honest, we were direct support to them. The shows were, if they weren't sold out, they were close in 2,000 capacity places.
Yeah, 1,000 capacity, 1,500, something like that.
We got $200 a night, and we got $200 a night plus merch, which was sometimes good and sometimes not. But gas prices were awful at the time.
Yeah, you're matching merch prices with a headliner who's selling their hoodie for $40 in the mid 2000s, and nobody's buying 2 hoodies that night, so we're not selling anything like that.
Totally.
No,
I get it.
They're making $15,000 a night.
Probably something like that.
That's nuts.
It was hard, and I think there was always to be candid, there was always conflict, there was always division in the band. We were, we're glossing over that stuff, and I don't. Nobody needs to sink into that, but because everybody's perspective will be different on it, but there was always some conflict. Where are we going? What are we doing? How are we going to make this work?
Yeah.
We love each other. We love the music, but sometimes we're in the van and we don't like each other very much. And we're sleeping on floors and we're sleeping in the van on it. But, we're sleeping on floors. And the next night we're playing at, Irving Plaza, or we're playing at like Showbox in Seattle or the Whiskey. And but then we play at the Whiskey and then we go and lay down in the van because we haven't made enough money to get a hotel that night. And that shit sucked for us in that way. And it was not good for the health and longevity of the group.
Yeah. We never had hotels. Like we never had, we would get sick. I got sick on the road. I think it was one of those. No, I think it was Youngbloods. I got so sick once. I probably should have went to the hospital. I got so sick on that tour. I remember being in Denver. I lost my voice, and my voice was permanently changed from the way. Like I used to be able to hit. I think I'm not really a good singer anyway, but I used to be able to hit certain notes that I can't hit anymore because of that. It was awful. But we were always trying to be true to what we were doing musically, and we were always holding on to the hope that would catch.
Yeah, somehow that would catch
crowd, and it would always catch with the right. It was really interesting. Every wave of Far Less had these core fans that would love us unconditionally as a band. And we always thought, when's that going to hit, bigger? And
when's that hit a bigger audience? Yeah. I think that was what kept us going as long as we were able to go, is that we would always connect with somebody. It was not a huge audience. We would lose fans on Tooth and Nail when they found out that we were not a Christian band. That hurt us to some degree. In that market. I remember distinctively Joseph having a conversation with a fan outside after a gig who was asking Joseph about his faith. And he was talking to him candidly about how Joseph did not share his faith or whatever. And I remember the guy unless I'm misremembering it, but I feel like I remember this guy crying because he had this anticipation or this look into what it meant to be a Tooth and Nail band, and we did not fit that mold. And Joseph's his candor was met with tears, basically.
Wow.
So but that's a part of it, and then we're trying to identify with people out on these things, playing these records, and somehow it just never fit the big picture of where we were, though we always connected with somebody. I mean, I will say, whatever it was, we always connected with somebody. I will say those however many. I noticed this. Joseph noticed this yesterday. One of the songs from the title track from A Toast to Bad Taste reached 100,000 plays on Spotify. That's
amazing.
And I agree with you. For a band that hasn't really been active in a very long time to have any streaming, so obviously somebody's connected with it somewhere.
Sure.
We just never saw that from a headlining perspective. If we went and played in Cleveland, we would have 10 to 20 people in Cleveland and who loved it, and then nobody else would be there. At all, unless the other bands brought some people out. But we've been on this for quite some time. I know. Yeah. Let's
recap real quick for everyone who's out to get us, if that's cool, Jeremy.
Yeah.
And then transition to Toast. But yeah, Everyone's Out to Get Us was a tough album cycle because we had all quit college, right? So that was a big tricky thing. We were all out of school. We had signed to this label, our first full length. All we want to do is be on the road, and all we want to do is break even. Because when we're not on the road, we're going to be writing a new record. We're going to be trying to work to have spending money on tour. We're all living with our parents or living with girlfriends or whatever it might be.
Sure.
So we were in it to win it. But when it was interesting because it was a time when we would go on tour with Emery and Amberlin on the Tooth and Nail tour and Classic Crime.
Yeah.
And Jonesetta, and come home way in debt. But then we could jump on the road for a week and play with, do a van routed tour with Sullivan and the Fold, and come home with a little money in our pockets.
Yeah.
So it's
I get it.
Do you chase the 1,000, 1,500 kids a night, or do you go play for a solid 100, 150? And keep the tour routed properly and be able to, so that's the identity. Another thing is the crisis of knowing exactly what to do or just stick with your goals. in House of Fools, and we were playing with Harvard and Charlotte, and playing these regional shows again. Ace's Basement in Greensboro had this scene. You've probably caught videos from Ace's Basement days where all the tour packages were coming through and they were filming all the sets, and we were bros with all those people. And then at the same time, it's like, well, what's next on a bigger scale? But then, the big tours are hard to get on, and, especially hard to get on when you put out a full length that does okay.
Yeah.
I get it. Doesn't see the sales, what are the numbers that you're chasing, Jordan, that you get to report every week?
All the sound scan
numbers, they're okay. But then we could go on, but then here's kind of how we transition to the next album is we had another like medium-sized tour on the books with Roses Are Red. Bed Light for Blue Eyes. And we needed to leave for tour, and Ray left the band, and you can't blame him. It's time to hit the road again, but you don't even have $5 in your pocket to get your dinner for the next show. I mean, it was such a tough time.
Yeah, exactly.
So Jordan and I were so stubborn, and we're also brothers, so it was really interesting. I think we were probably really hard to be in a band with sometimes, because not only would we always share an opinion, we would also always argue with each other. So like, we don't do that anymore, but back then I imagine being in a band with the two of us was.
No, I believe it.
Was tough.
I want to give I want to second that. It's taken a really long time for me to realize that like a lot of the internal conflict probably, came from that stubbornness from my end and from our end. And like Joseph said, it's we're brothers, but we have always had this thing where we talk to each other so candidly. And I think a lot of people were just like, oh my God, they're arguing with each other. And I didn't mean to cut you off.
We never noticed it as arguing. We were brothers.
I get that.
We all know how that is, but yeah, it became funny though later. People can do a pretty good impression of the two of us arguing, and it's funny, which we obviously.
So Ray leaves the band, and at the time, I mean, it's like, screw that, I mean, I'm like, what is it, why is he doing that? And you fast forward 15 years, and it's a lot easier to look at that from, and I have no idea what his lens was at that moment in time. We've not circled back and discussed it much, but it's much easier to look at it through the lens of like, he was watching the wheels spinning, and he didn't want to do that, wherever he was in his life, or for whatever reason that he didn't show up to leave for the tour that day. We left without him, and completely went a different direction from that moment on. We went to New Jersey. We played acoustically. We ended up calling Todd Turner, who was the drummer on Toast to Bad Taste. Todd was the drummer of The Necessary. The Necessary had transitioned into a band called House of Fools, who had signed with Drive Thru, though they did that without Todd. And so we were extremely good friends with those guys. We'll talk about it maybe if we have enough time in a little bit. I ended up in House of Fools after Far Less, but we called Todd up. It just made sense. Our drummer had left. He had not moved on with House of Fools for whatever reason. And it just kind of made sense. We called Todd up. He was immediately on board with joining the group. I want to mention that the drummer of Roses Are Red, Mike, actually played drums for how many shows, Joseph? 2 or 3? He learned
one or two. Yeah.
1 or 2. But he learned some songs well enough to get through and give us a chance to actually like still play the dates that were booked. And then we got down to North Carolina. Todd learned the tracks. We played with Todd, finished up whatever dates were on the tour, and then came back living in Virginia.
By the way, we became great friends with Roses Are Red and Bed Light. It's awesome. One of those, you tour with those smaller bands that are in the same struggle as you are.
Yeah.
Some shows are good, some shows are awful. You're trying to figure out where to, you don't get closer with guys.
No, I get that.
There's something to be said about being in a band.
Dude, I get it. Like, it's funny 'cause from the perspective of a promoter, as I was, I know for me, I saw the dynamics and I saw, people on their good days and their bad days, and they all had the same problems I had. So it's like, it makes sense. And you're, stuck in a van for, 8 hours a day at least. I mean, sometimes my wife and I get on each other's nerves, and we're in a decent sized home,
That's
so
right.
I get that.
Yeah.
So, let me ask you this. We'll talk about A Toast to Bad Taste. I love this record, by the way. Not that I didn't like the other ones, but this is the one I really, really liked. And, your Swan Song record, obviously, with Tooth and Nail, at least. Let's talk about that record. I know you kind of mentioned bringing Todd into the fold. What are your thoughts on this record? And definitely a different direction than the previous record. So maybe your thoughts on it.
So we're, I think we are transitioning into a different drummer. Todd plays drums completely differently than Ray. Todd, Ray is a complete madman behind the drums. Todd's coming from a different perspective, playing in a lot of like indie, kind of like indie rock and sort of pop punk bands and rock bands. So Todd's looking at it a little differently. We're playing some of these songs, and I think Todd will be the first to say he was not connecting with playing the drums that way, and we were ready to go in a different direction. I think everybody involved, Brandon and myself, Mark, Joseph, Todd, we're all ready to go in a different direction. And so I think we're thinking like, we want to make a record that feels, more like an alt rock kind of thing, sort of less progressive, less musically heady, more song driven and oriented. So we start writing songs for Toast to Bad Taste, and Brandon at this point in time, Brandon Welch is playing guitar. So he has also picked up a guitar. He's writing some songs on the guitar. Very specifically the main riff for Toast to Bad Taste. I remember Brandon bringing in So Glad later in the record, songs that were a little more finished ideas than kind of putting together. Far Less's workflow before this is that we bring in riffs. I might be in a Ray or whoever brings in a riff, and we write a song around a riff. And this was a different way to write songs. So we're still out playing some shows, but we're writing a new record. And I remember we end up going out to Texas and to play some gigs, and they were the Ridgely Music Fest, I guess it was, in Fort Worth. And we ended up staying with our friend Alan Summers and his family and recording at this point in time demos for what would be the demos for Toast. Several demos with his brother Larry, who had a Pro Tools rig in his house. The guy was it was a very interesting situation. We're staying at these dudes' parents' house. They're so wonderful. They're the dad's like the promoter for these shows.
Oh wow.
And then we're staying at this place, and Larry's up here, like smoking pot out of a volcano. I've never seen anybody do that before, and but then like recording us, and we're making actually I think some really great cool demos.
Some of the best music.
Could come out at that point that we had come up with at that point. We were writing these It Only Rains When I'm in Texas. Was that the name of one of the songs?
Yeah, that song's great. I wish I had that. Yeah, but we wrote some stuff that didn't end up on the record and some stuff that did. And I want to say the transition with Todd was just seamless. And it's not really like we sat down and said, hey, let's not be as heavy. It just happened that was Todd's drumming style matched with the contemporaries that we were friends with and listening to, being Classic Case, House of Fools, Paulson, I've already mentioned, but we were
Code 7. Code 7 was another big one at that point.
On their record cycle for Dancing Echoes. Love Drug had an album out at the time. There was so much happening in that like rock scene that was like, we were really big Cave-In fans, and they had done Antenna, and they and so it was not a conversation. Hey guys, it's time to stop screaming. And if Ray had stayed in the band, we potentially could have gotten more progressive, just like without even talking about it. It just so happened that the first writing session with Todd, he's just such a pocket drummer that I was stepping up and trying to do some new stuff on bass, and the stuff we were listening to, Me Without You was really evolving their sound in some kind of way. And like, we were trying to still be a contemporary creative band, and it just happened to be melodic and still heavy in some kind of ways, but just less like there's Toast of Bad Taste doesn't really have any screaming at all.
Right. And I want to give some credit where it's due also to Mark Carson at this point in time, because Mark Carson at this point in time is the other guitar player is thinking in a completely different way than me. I'm still, I've never been a huge pedal effects guy. I like to have a pretty clean, small pedal board still to this day. And Mark's over here with some kind of multi-effects unit trying to come up with all these weird, wacky, brainy effects, the textural things, and all this stuff that ends up on the record. And I will say that there was some chemistry immediately with Todd and Mark, I think, and Brandon's bringing in songs. It's fun to recollect. I have not thought about this stuff in a really long time, so much of it is vague. But to give credit where it's due, I do think that those guys stepping up and Brandon picking up the guitar, it just immediately was going to go in a different direction. Todd's not into the same kind of thing, and it really felt like at that point in time that we were all really solid in our vision of what we want to make, how we want to do it. The demos that we make in Texas and the other demos that we make are not a far cry. We're recording demos in Brandon Hackler's basement at this point. They're not a far cry from what we end up making on the final record. But
we did some demos with Jamie King also again.
Oh, we did. We recorded some demos we hadn't recorded with Jamie in a long time, and we went back and recorded some of the demos for Toast with Jamie. So we're starting to kind of put this thing together, and Tooth and Nail's asking us like who's gonna record this, and so at this point we're having a bigger comprehensive talk about who's making this record, how do we find this sound. I ended up on the phone with Barrett Jones, who made the first Foo Fighters album.
Wow.
He had done the I Am the Avalanche album. And we all, or at least I can't say we all, but Joseph and I specifically really liked that and how it sounded. And so we're starting to have discussions with producers, but in our management at the time had an idea of who they wanted us to go with. The record label was always pointing us in a different direction. And once again, we kind of like took the reins on our own and said, no. We ended up choosing Mike Green, who had made Live and Learn, the House of Fools album, Live and Learn. We were best friends with House of Fools, and thought the record was great. And I don't really know, Joseph, do you have any more to touch on with the producer, how we ended up there?
He had done the first Paramore record.
Oh, wow.
That did pretty well, and a couple other bands, and we met him and we liked him, and that was in Los Angeles, and we were just excited to go to Los Angeles. I mean, most of the producers in LA were out of budget for us.
Yeah.
The mic and
the amount of money that we got from Tooth and Nail, and I've continued to make records since then. And I've thought to myself, I wish that I had the money that we had. I mean, it's not like Tooth and Nail was not paying a decent amount of money for us to make records. They invested in the band. And we had budgets, but at the time when nobody's recording at home. Every studio is a big box studio, including Mike's, which was a smaller big box studio, but still a big studio. Everything is expensive. You can't make a record. You can make a record now, a really great sounding record at your house. If you choose to do so. You can't do that at the time. So, $30,000, $40,000, whatever it ends up being, it didn't stretch that far in the record making world. You can't go and make a record with Matt Wallace for $30,000 or $40,000. You may be able to go and make 3 or 4 songs, with one of those guys for that kind of money. So we can't go make a record with Joe Barresi. We love Queens of the Stone Age, but we can't go make a record with the guy who's making that. So it made sense. Mike was in budget. He had one thing I'll note is that he had a very strong sense that pre-production was valuable. Some of the other people that we talked to were kind of like, for this kind of money, we're going to come in here, we're going to plug up, and we're going to practice, and we're going to play. Yeah. Mike was like, you guys are going to come in here for a week before we ever lay one single thing down and send me every demo you have And so we arrive in Los Angeles, and the band is Todd Turner, Joseph and myself, and Brandon Welch and Mark Karsten. We arrive in Los Angeles. Tooth and Nail puts us up at what was the name of this place, Joseph? What was the apartment complex? They made a Netflix documentary about it.
Yeah, it's in Universal City, Burbank. I can't remember the name. It was right on
Melrose Place.
Yeah. So anyway, we start making this record with Mike, and pre-production is so important to him. So he has taken. I remember feeling off-put by this at first, and I'm really glad that we didn't do the normal Far Less thing, kind of argue him out of it. But he had taken our songs and put songs together. He had taken our songs and taken the best parts of certain songs and put them in other songs. So he would sit down with a guitar and play this lick and then go into this other thing. And I'm like, you're playing two of our songs. And he's like, I know, but I think they make a better. I think these two songs make one better song.
That's amazing.
And in retrospect, I'm glad he did it that way. I love Toast to Bad Taste. I'm glad we made it. The Mike had a vision with how he put songs together. Gentlemen Go to Sleep was 2 songs, maybe 3 songs that we had. And Mike put them together into one thing. I remember him showing me how to play chords that I did not know how to play. I was like, oh, that's cool sounding. The guy was so brilliant at guitar and music that he was able to take things apart like that. But
yeah, totally.
But anyway,
yeah. So that was a good experience. It was fun. We lived in Los Angeles. We had played plenty of shows there, but we hadn't been there for more than a day or two at a time. So yeah, we would drive through, like, from Burbank through Hollywood down to kind of West LA every single day.
Like 2-hour drive to get to the studio.
Other than it being a great experience, there's one thing of note, one thing of note that happened while we were there, because this was in 2006, recording, as we woke up one morning being a band from home base Blacksburg, Virginia's. We were in LA recording Toast when the Virginia Tech shooting happened.
Oh, yeah.
And all of our friends many of our friends and my wife, now girlfriend then, were on campus or in campus housing at the time. And it was a tough day.
Yeah. We had to go record that day. It was crazy. We were thinking, the world was upside. I mean, that was our little part of the world that was everywhere. It was all over the news. It was a complete tragedy, obviously, but
we had flown out a friend, Bitsy Elizabeth, to play keys on the album. And while she was there, we actually asked her to join the band. So she toured with us after the album came out for a while. But she was a student at Virginia Tech, and she had left that semester, I think, to play with us. But she had friends who were, like, in classrooms when it happened, and
crazy.
Yeah, it was tough. So yeah, that's just something that sticks in my head from the time.
Oakwood Manor. Sorry.
Oakwood Manor.
I know what you're talking about.
The Oakwood Manor.
Played a lot of Wii Sports. Went to the pool a lot.
I went to the studio every day. I went to the studio every day.
Jordan was
I did. Yeah, after I recorded bass, I didn't go to the studio too much more. But I met some people. I don't remember exactly how I met this dude, Dave. But I started working. I rode with him down in his truck to, like, Temecula, and did stage setup for some wine festival, and just got paid a couple $100 for doing it. And then he and I and a friend of his, Leo, went to the Henry Fonda Theater and saw the band Isis
nice.
Play with Zozabra, which is Caleb from Cave-In. That was an amazing show.
That's awesome. That sounds cool.
Yeah, so we just kind of hung out, and it was a really great time for us as a band, because we knew we were writing something that felt special to us. And then we finished it, mixed, mastered, ready for release. This was probably this was 06. When did it come out, Jordan?
07 maybe.
I think it came out in 07, but
Yeah, it came out in
Well,
the
it came. We recorded it in the spring of whichever year it is, and it came out in the fall of the same year, right?
Yeah.
So we were in the spring, and I say that because I distinctively remember that the Blacksburg situation was in April. So we recorded it at that point in time, and then fast forward about 6 months past that, I think is when it comes out. So we're doing a little bit of touring.
2007. I think the shooting was in 2007.
Oh,
yeah, I think it was. I think it was 2007. Other people may have better recollections of time periods than me, but they all become a big wash. Pretty sure it was 2007. And then, I think that Tooth and Nail, I want to say, of everything that we had done up to that, which for them was an EP and one more full length. I want to say that I think collectively as a unit, they were more excited about this.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was curious. Yeah, I figured that. I
think the record label was excited about it. I think they saw some potential for some success. We had done music videos before, a couple, but this was, they had given us a budget for a couple more music videos, which we did with Jesse from Paulson, was a music video director. Jesse is really great at a lot of things. And he made the Toast music video, and what was the other one we did on that record? It's Not Me, It's You. Yeah, It's Not Me, It's You. So we did some videos. The record label really liked them. They're talking to us about distribution for this, maybe putting a little more money behind the idea that this can potentially do something as far as taking on a little sure. better than the others. We're having discussions of in which markets do you guys want us to pay for end caps at record stores, things like that. We hadn't had those conversations with them before that. So if it feels like Tooth and Nail's a little more, John Frazier's always in our corner. Yeah. This should be mentioned that our A&R guy at Tooth and Nail is always has our back. John, he would present ideas to us, and he was candid with us about how other people at the record label felt, primarily Chad and Brandon, about, the band and the decisions that we have made and the decision to be openly a non-Christian band on a Christian record label. Those kinds of things. But John was always supportive, and John remains our friend. Yeah. And John was always extremely supportive of what we did. But I do think that there was a little twinkle in everybody's eye about what we were doing with this one. That's awesome. Maybe it was just more palatable all the way across the board. I think this record was going to make sense for people who like things with distorted guitars, but extremely melody focused. And for us too, I think, like Joseph said, I think we kind of knew when we took a step back after we listened to the mixes from Mike, and we took a step back and we're like, okay, this is different for us, but this thing seems very cool. Made a couple for us, at least high budget looking music videos. They felt important. I felt like the thing was important. We had gotten a little MTV slot somewhere prior to that, and so we're riding a train that starts to feel like it's going in a good direction. It's kind of where I'm at.
And I'll tell you how it got derailed.
Wait,
coming up.
Is this the end of the band essentially, or does it lead? Is it leading? I was gonna say, let's tell the story, and then what is the band?
Let's see where it goes.
Yeah. So this is what leads to it. So. Coming out of the recording of the album and the anticipation of the release, Jordan, you might have to fill in some gaps, but it's not super important. But we ended up around the release, we did a tour where we started the tour in Canada, right? Now, so I think we solo toured across the country with friends or whatever it may be. I think we stopped back in Fort Worth with Alan and played another Ridgely Metal Fest. I remember because we played a day with Circus Survive and As Tall as Lions. Wow. And the other day was like Russian Circles and Pelican. And it was just a really great festival because, Alan Summers was always such a he's still our friend and supporter of the band, and his bands would always play with us. And we ended up going across the country. Our friend this is long story short, but the first band we were in, Esoteric, our drummer from that band, he now is an engineer, sound engineer, and tours with National Acts. Like he's done a couple tours with Tool and 311 and some big bands. And so he was running sound for us a lot, just as a friend, hanging out and going on the road. And I'm not sure if he was on this tour or not, but yeah, we ended up, in Canada with Secret and Whisper. It was right when they signed to Tooth and Nail. Secret and Whisper and a band called Covette. And we were playing a lot with
California.
They're from California. We were playing a lot with Sullivan at the time. I don't know if and Glass Ocean, which was a couple of guys from the Chariot, Beiser and Keller. So yeah, we did this Canada tour. Started in Vancouver. The Secret Whisper are from Kelowna, which is like a tourist town east of Vancouver in British Columbia. Played Kelowna, like that. You know, those guys are just phenomenal. They're some of the best bros we've ever had. They were in a major label band before Secret Whisper called Stutterfly.
Stutterfly, yeah.
Yeah, and so their hometown show was just bonkers. And then we went across, Western Canada playing with them, and then we brought them back into the States with us. And I remember our
this is when the album's getting released, by the way.
This is when the album's getting released.
This is like the fall of 2007.
These were good shows, fun shows. We crossed back into the States from I think Saskatchewan, coming back in. The border police were absolutely awful to us. They raided our van and trailer.
yeah, they took it all apart looking for some weed.
And then I remember driving through North Dakota that night. The next show was in Chicago, and after many years of being on the road, had never hit a deer. We didn't hit a deer, but a deer hit us. Wow. I remember driving in the middle of the night, and I saw a deer in the rear view, and I was like, "Oh shit!" And I see the deer, and it misses the van, and it gets hit by the trailer, and it ripped the deer in half, and it ripped off our fender. But we just threw the fender in the trailer and kept going. But yeah, long story short, great tour, and same thing, just best friends, good tour. Van and trailer tour, no buses. The album comes out. This is the fall of 2007. I'm so excited about the album. And I just basically remember my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now, I remember saying to her after, this is 4 years, out of college, I was like, if this record doesn't do what we suspect it'll do, I'll go back to school the next semester. So would have been the spring semester.
Winter. Yeah, the spring semester. Yep.
Yeah, so we still continued to kind of bounce around and do small tours, and we weren't getting offered.
It just didn't take on real quick.
Any national support. Was the was Emery and Amberlin? Was that?
That was prior. That was Everyone Is Out to Get Us.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, so nothing was happening, and the record came out in the fall, and so I left the band after being in the band since like 2000.
Was that tough?
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, it was formative years as a young man. Trying to figure out, my girlfriend we had dated since high school, and we're obviously married now. And she started and finished college while I was on my break, right? So she got a job in Blacksburg because I was still there. And so, yeah, I mean, I remember I wrote a little public announcement about my leaving the band, and it got published on Punk Rock Vids or whatever.
Absolute Punk, baby.
Yeah, Absolute Punk,
like Lamb Goat, PRP, all those things. Probably put that out. Yeah,
all those, and I left the band, and yeah, it was tough. But I jumped right back into college, and while they were still, not much was happening on the record cycle. And about, I think, like a week or two after I quit the band, they got offered a really good tour with May that I would have been stoked on. But I'll let Jordan take over from here. I left the band, and I didn't pick up an instrument for a few years, and just did the school thing, got married, finished school, while Far Less was probably a band for another year.
Probably longer. I think I can take it from there. So yeah, Joseph leaves the band, but we did have a plan of action. At that point in time, we were really good friends with, and still are very good friends with a man, Brandon Hackler. Brandon had, I think, a desire to play with us. So, Joseph's leaving the band. Brandon wants to play. Brandon's primarily a guitar player. He had recorded a lot. We played with he had a band called the Commonwealth and another band, A Day Late from Virginia, who we were friends with for many years. And we had developed a nice friendship with Brandon. And so he just comes into the band and plays bass for 1 or 2 shows. And all of a sudden we get offered this tour with May. Wow. And so the lineup is Brandon and Todd, myself, Bitsy on keyboard. She is still playing with us at this point in time, and Brandon Welch, and Mark on the guitar. There is a situation, I really honestly would misremember too much of it to accurately tell you what happened, but one thing led to another, and Mark Carson could not play with us anymore. He had some life things going on and made the decision to leave the band around the same time, or he left the band around the same time. I think the tour was coming up, and there were just too many complications to move forward with Mark, and we love Mark dearly, but we had to make kind of a decision right then and there, because May was, at that point in time, kind of coming off the heels of touring with Foo Fighters and Weezer, and we're like, we got to go do this. We have to make it work. The ambition and drive is there. Brand new record is out. So we kind of made the decision for Bitsy. Elizabeth at the time was dating Jared Drawn from Classic Case, who had been the singer of Telescream with the Code 7 guys and a good friend of ours. And so we make the decision for him to come along and play the bass. He was gracious to go and do that with us. And Brandon Hackler to transition over to the other guitar. And we just went ahead and put this band together. And it probably is of note that we were having some disagreements with Todd. Again, the perspective of that is probably, again, it's so many years removed. I can't tell you exactly how it worked, but Todd left the band as well. And a friend of ours, Tyler Hill, a great drummer and friend of ours, came right on board. So we have effectively a brand new band. It's Brandon Welch and I, and a brand new band. Coming
but it's not really weird, because we're all friends.
We're all friends with them, friends with everybody, but we have
musicians. And I remember going and seeing them, and it was just it seemed natural lineup.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, I think but kind of 3 people leaving around the same time was unusual. We had never dealt with anything like that before. But we hop in a van and we're doing this tour and opening for May and the honorary title. And the honorary title were Direct Support. And it was crazy cool and crazy good. But our keyboard player, Bitsy, and Jared, who were together at the time, we're not feeling it for the same obvious reasons that Ray wasn't feeling it before. There was just no money. There was no money to be made at all.
Same shit, different tour. It's still
exactly
you're
the same.
playing for a couple. I know you guys were playing sold out House of Blues.
Oh yeah, we're playing for 1,000 people a night or 500 people a night or whatever, and there's some merch money. Yeah, there's some merch money, but there's no real money coming in the door, and nobody's making a paycheck. I think that's the way that you have to say it. Nobody's making a paycheck for being in Far Less ever. Nobody's ever making a paycheck. I'm in my mid-20s, and I'm like, we're going to do this still, though, and I'm probably still that bullheaded, difficult man to work with. This vision, and we're going to see it through no matter what. So one thing leads to another, and about halfway through this tour in Lawrence, Kansas, I will always remember this happening in Lawrence, Kansas. For some reason, we played a really great show at the Bottleneck or the Granada. It was Granada, actually. Yeah. You're right. We did Granada or Bottleneck on other tours, but it was at Granada. And afterwards, Bitsy basically made the decision. Jared had left the day before that. He had gotten sick and he needed to go home. I'll tell you what we ended up doing about that. But Bitsy also makes the decision to leave. She goes to the airport and leaves, and we are stuck in the middle of America with no band. And so Mike Shea, who was one of the guitar players in the format, was playing guitar for the honorary title at the time. And he and I had hit it off like straight up brothers from the very beginning of the tour. He was a fan of the band. He liked the band, and he was like, I'll play the bass for you guys. So we pretty much poached. Jared left, and we pretty much poached Mike from the honorary. They were gracious to let him do this for quite some time, and we continue this tour. He learned the songs overnight. He was wonderful. Robert from May was the keyboard player for May for a number of years. He jumped in, learned Bitsy's piano parts, and it was awesome. Kind of a seamless transition with these. Looking back at it, outrageous professional musicians. I mean, these guys were like so good they could learn a band songs overnight, and they did them justice. And we continue to tour and make friends and make memories for the next number of weeks with May and the honorary title. May were the finest group of people you could ever go on, the most gracious, wonderful group. I have nothing but fabulous things to say about Dave and Zach and the rest of the guys were just
awesome.
Were just tremendously cool and treated us like family while we were out there. But at some point in time, the honorary title said, we need Mike to just play in the honorary title tonight. He can't play 2 gigs every single night. So we call up Josh from House of Fools, was the singer of House of Fools, just so happens to be in the area we are around the same time, either on tour or making a recording or something. And we call Josh up because Josh used to be a bass player, and he's happy. He's been out of the house on tour with House of Fools for 2 months already. He doesn't want to go home. And we're like, hey, will you learn the bass parts and play for the rest of the tour? So he comes on, at this point in time, 3rd bass player on a 6-week tour. He comes on, learns the bass. I remember we were teaching him the bass lines for the songs on A Toast to Bad Taste in the Dealey Plaza parking lot in Dallas, Texas, the parking lot where right down by where JFK was assassinated. Wow. Sitting in that parking lot, I don't know why we were there playing, and finished up this tour with Josh on bass. And I think at that point in time when we got home, it was so cool. May was great. The honorary title were great. The bands were awesome and super friendly. I want to say the other band on the tour was a band called Between the Trees. Between the Trees from Orlando. They had a huge fan base in Orlando. We played at the House of Blues, and they actually headlined that night over May. I'm pretty sure they headlined that night. But we got home from this thing, again, treated like wonderfully by the bands, and everybody came to our aid and helped us out and helped us get through it. But when we got back, we were like, does this work? We're all living together in this house in Radford, Virginia, or several of us are. I know Tyler, Brandon, and I are living in this house together, and Brandon Welsh is living up the street. And we're like, how do we make this work? So we try to continue to make it work for some amount of time. Brandon Hackler is getting good at recording, and we're writing songs still. But everybody kind of has a different vision. Our friend that we mentioned earlier, Brian Freeman, who I looked up to as a kid, he was in a band from my hometown. He moves to Blacksburg to go to Virginia Tech a little later in life, and he ends up playing bass with us for a year or two. But during that time, we're not really touring. We're not doing anything that looks like that. It's pretty up in the air. Our relationship with Tooth and Nail is not. Personally, it was always fine, but it's nobody has any expectations anymore. We've given this thing a real. You've given it the real college try, and it's not ever stuck. We've never sold any more than 15 or 20,000 copies of any of the records, which is below expectation for sinking that kind of money into something at that point in time. And so we're kind of spinning wheels and trying to figure out what's going on. And at some point in time, I remember waking up in the morning in my house and reading an email from Brandon Welch and Brandon Hackler, and it's saying, we want to go in a different direction with this. We have some other plans. We want to do this differently. Which I took as, we need to do something different. I'm sure at the time I was like, screw this whole situation. So I call and tell my buddies in House of Fools, this isn't working out with Far Less. I'm lost. I don't know what to do. And I ended up immediately joining House of Fools. Their bass player, Jeff, was leaving, and I was lost, and the other guys had a different direction they wanted to go in. And so they which they did for a little bit. And then I moved immediately down to Greensboro, and I personally never look back, not never look back. I look at Far Less as a very fond moment in my life, but I never stopped playing. Is what I'm trying to drive.
Yeah, I get it.
I went from one full-time thing, immediately hopped into another full-time thing. So,
Crazy.
you know, I moved down here, met my wife, and still to this day, I play in a band with. I play in bands with all of the guys from House of Fools. Jack and David are in Bow, my current original project, and I play in a party band with Josh and Josh King, and have always continued to play music with those guys. But you know, the ending of the situation was, which would be recanted differently from all different members, I'm sure would give you a different version of it, which is why I'm not really dying to completely go into it. But it wasn't great. We weren't happy necessarily. None of us were living the same expectations, and you know, everybody had different versions of what they wanted to see, and to say we were getting along all the time would be a lie. I mean, we weren't. We were, you know, we're living together, trying to on a record label that has successful albums, and you just are spinning wheels constantly, no matter which way you go. So, I'm sorry I took up so much time.
It was like the classic couple that's been married couple that begin to resent each other and still love each other, but don't always like each other because you're just, you know.
Yeah. Just deal with each other.
You all want this measure of success, and you all have faith. You have faith in each other, but the world doesn't always share the same.
Yeah.
So, that's really how Far Less kind of fizzled out.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a big breakup,
blow up or anything. Yeah, no, I get that. I mean,
the band wasn't also popular enough at that time. Like the record cycle fizzled out. The band.
It makes sense. I mean, I feel like, you know, you can only do it for so long, and you know, at that point, it's like, what are we all gaining here? Yeah, we're writing great music, but you know, if there's no benefit and you know, economically and mentally and all these other things, then what's the, you know, there's a time to move on. And you know, obviously, it sounds like that was the case, you know, for everyone involved. Let me ask you this: looking back, you know, almost 20 years. You know, how do you feel about the band in general? Just like, you know, it sounds like you guys seem like you're very fond of it, which is cool. I love that, looking back on it. But just, it's not so much the impact, but like, you know, looking back on it overall, how do you guys feel about your time in the band and just kind of what you accomplished?
Let me let you go first with that one, Joseph.
Yeah, the things that I accomplished or learned from being a band are the most valuable experiences I've had in my life. Like, the way to navigate interpersonal relationships, business, when, you know, understanding the fine line between business and personal life, like those skills have immeasurably helped me in my relationships and careers. But past that, I'm like super proud of the music, you know, because I always like to think Toast is what you say, to steal from the Lego movie, the piece of resistance. But then I'll go turn to the Bride or Broken Hearts Unite or Everyone Is Out to Get Us, and personally I'm not super into the heavier stuff now, but I'll still listen to those tracks. But every single record has 4 or 5 songs that you can listen to them and they do not sound like they were recorded or written 15
I get that.
years ago. They're like just good rock songs with good melodies and good rhythms, you know, and I do feel like every version of the band had chemistry. Like, we had chemistry, and I was like never the best bass player on tour. But I was good at playing the parts, like of the songs we wrote. And like, that's one thing I always say, like, I'm not the best at that, but I wasn't the best bassist, but I was good at being in a band. Like, right. I was like a good bandmate to have, because of the things and that's maybe why I'm in project management now. Right. I'm good at making sure
that relationships.
Yes. You know,
Joseph made sure the van always ran. You know, he made sure the credit card payment got paid. Yeah, he absorbed debt. Joseph absorbed debt. It was a big part of the problem. Was the money stuff. You know.
Yeah, but I also made sure, and this is just a personal thing, not necessarily professional, but I always wanted to make sure the relationships were strong with the bands we were on the road with, and
totally.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's harder to keep your own house in order, you know. And
no, it is.
We did have struggles internally, but I guarantee, like, every band you talk to has internal struggles, because you're a group of, you know, testosterone and nicotine.
Messy people, buddy. Messy people.
And in our 20s, you know, like all of us dealing with our stuff with our own relationships and money and family. And
No, I
and when
get
all
that.
you want to do.
Yeah, and no real
And I
adult way to
would not
talk
trade
about
that.
stuff.
I would absolutely never trade that decade of my life for even an opportunity to do a shortcut like America's Got Talent or something. I'm
Yeah,
not trying to
same.
go be on a stage and be judged by a bunch of doofuses. Like, I just want to go, and that's why I'm so happy that I'm playing music now with the people I'm playing with. And
Totally.
by the way, every member of Far Less basically is now playing in a group is amazingly talented. But I don't have aspirations to do. I mean, I have aspirations, but like, I'm stoked to go play in a dark corner of a bar for the few people that want to come see me make loud noises. You know,
Yeah.
just to connect.
I love that.
Yeah. I guarantee
So
you that's a theme that you hear a bunch. And I don't mean to cut you off, Joseph, but I got to comment on this. It's a theme when you're interviewing those of us who were involved in this scene, whatever this was in the 2000s. I would say a recurring theme is a vast majority of these people are still doing it to some degree, but you're doing it with a little bit different intention. You know, you're not trying to make money on, you realize there is no money to be made. So you don't have that ever in the back of your mind. You're making music only because you enjoy making music. You enjoy the Monday after work where you get to meet up with the guys. That's what Of Sinking Ships do. They meet up every Monday and they work on songs, and whether the objective is to play a gig or to write a song or whatever it is, you look forward to that meaningful moment because the vast majority of us have transitioned into other areas of professional pursuit. But you love music, you love it, you started doing it that's what you did. So
and just, I know we're all pretty talkative dudes, but I know we're getting toward the end of this, but I don't want to discount, like, after Todd left Far Less, Todd went on and he and Brandon did a project together, making music. He played drums for Code 7 for a tour.
Crazy.
I mean, not only has he creatively continued to play music, but he finished school and he actually teaches photography in college. He's a college professor.
Yeah, Brandon Welch has a new band, Iro.
And Ray played drums on it.
Ray played drums on that record. Brandon Hackler and I have continued to make music together he's my, a person that I consider probably a musical soulmate in a lot of ways. He and I have continued to make music. We've produced a lot of albums for different kinds of bands, and he continues to record and mix and do artwork, visual artwork, music videos, and he's a Renaissance man for sure. Brandon, and he played in Far Less for quite some time, but only did one major tour, the May tour. But then, of course, stayed with us while we were trying to kind of work it all out. But he and I have continued to make music, and still to this day, I mean, he's mixing a song that he and I finished. I tracked guitars with him last week at his home studio in Wilmington, North Carolina, and tracked vocals this week. So, I'm anticipating a mix from him today or what, for a new thing that he and I work on pretty heavily together. But I don't know that I remember what the original question was, but I think it was kind of trying to put a cap in where we are and how I look back at this. I look back at it resentfully for a time. I mean, I should be very honest about it. I was not, Far Less was a sore subject to me. And I think that everybody in the group would always agree with this assessment. And this is not to diminish Joseph's role in the group, because Joseph was an unbelievable bandmate. But as far as the creative juice of the band, or the struggle of the creative juice of the band, it was Brandon Welch and I. And it was kind of our, we were. And that's not to take away. Just he and I were the ones who stayed from the beginning to the end. I think that's the way to look at it. Is in every iteration of Far Less, you have Jordan and Brandon. It was. We went in a different direction. It was tough. It was really tough. Brandon and I have since made we had another band, Planet of the Sun, a stoner rock band together. Brandon is completely brilliant, but for some amount of time, the decisions that were made or whatever, I didn't feel good about it. I didn't want to do it. We did a couple of reunion shows. I was never stoked to do them, and then we got in the middle of them, and I was, as soon as I got back in it with the guys again, I was like, oh my God, this is great. But I was pursuing music full time and have never stopped playing music full time. During that time, between 2009 or 10 and today, I have never stopped playing music full time. I always have played music. So Far Less it is more distant. I had a long run with House of Fools after Far Less, and then continued to play with a number of other people. Again, Joseph mentioned that everybody kept on with their musical projects, but from my perspective, Far Less was always something that I had done, not something that I was wanting to continue to do. It was, but right now, this minute, I look at it from a very fond scope. I look at it from afar. I saw that yesterday about the 100,000 plays on Spotify.
That's amazing.
It completely blew my mind. I know that's for Spotify numbers. That's not a big thing, but to have a band that's been defunct and not done anything for that long, have that many people on one platform alone play a song that many times.
It's cool.
To me, kind of blows my mind. And that's a cumulative effort. From a long time ago. It's a funny thing to think about. I mean, I haven't thought about or talked about Toast to Bad Taste since the last time we got together and played some shows a few years ago. We went out and played 10 years, had a reunion or a little tour they did, and they invited us to come out and play some shows, and we played one out in Asheville with them and played a gig with House of Fools. And I hadn't thought about Toast to Bad Taste again since then. Since 2000, when was that, Joseph? 2018, 2019, something like that. It was before the pandemic. And then to sit back here and think about it with you, Jeremy, and to talk about these things with you guys, I have nothing but fun and wonderful things to say about that. It was a tough thing. It was growing up. That was what growing up looked like for me. Growing up looked like Far Less. That's what it was. I mean, that's me growing up in my 20s and trying to learn how to be a person and navigate things. And I imagine, like we have said a number of times, I was probably impossible to deal with, whatever. But I would hope that other people can look at it through similar lens later on. I don't know. We don't talk about it, but we do still talk. And I wish nothing but the very best for the people who were in Far Less, and whatever it is that they're doing with their lives and music and all that stuff. We love each other. We try to stay in touch, and I want to, if I'm forgetting any of the bands that anybody else has been in, I don't want to forget that,
fine. I get it.
But yeah. We should probably make mention of Bow really quick, the band that I'm doing right now.
I was going to say, real quick, just briefly, your projects, your current projects real quick, and then we'll close up shop.
So I have started writing and recording music a number of years ago with Jack from House of Fools on the drums. We call it Bal, B-A-L, pronounced like pal, P-A-L. But we just started recently doing shows in the last year or so with David McLaughlin from House of Fools and a guy that I play in a party band with, Andy Ware, plays the bass. And it's just this story that I wrote about it's a science fiction. It follows a science fiction story that I wrote. You can find us on Instagram or whatever, same as, Of Sinking Ships that Joseph is doing right now. So you do it and you try to make it as cool as it can possibly be. You look at it from the same lens as you did when you're creating the content and creating the music, but kind of knowing that we do this for fun. We love it. Jack plays full-time in a group called Sarah Shook and the Disarmers, who are an internationally touring group. They just released a new single yesterday. It's really great. So we just can't. Joseph, we work full-time. You can't do it again. You can't ever go back and do it again like you did.
I get it.
I could do this, Jeremy. I could sit here for 10 more hours with you, and
I'll take that as a compliment.
Tell you stories. No, this has been so wonderful. I've had a really, really great time.
Awesome, man. Joseph, tell me, you mentioned Of Sinking Ships. Just kind of briefly touch on that, and anything else.
Yeah, everyone needs to check out Of Sinking Ships, my new band that has been a band since like 2002 or 2003. It's always been not really a side project, but a passion project for Chad Waldrop. plays bass guitar in the band Hopes Fall, but he plays lead guitar, and Of Sinking Ships. It's an instrumental rock band. Some of the stuff is quite ambient, but some of it gets pretty heavy. Some of the newer stuff that we're writing now is a little bit mathy, a little technical, a little heavy. We don't really say post rock, but it is. Say in that genre,
sure.
Just consider it an instrumental rock band. I mean, it really draws a lot of influences from like Hum and a lot of the mid tempo, drop D kind of, technically drop C, hard rocking music. But it's Chad, Grayson, the other guitarist. He was in a band back in the day called One Amazing Kid.
Oh yeah.
Drummer Tim. Tim was in Harvard. Charlotte rock band. Before Harvard, Tim was in a band called Tim Missing Days, one of the early bands that Far Less played with. So I've known Tim for forever. And honestly, I was a super big fan of the band before, I joined when I lived in Charlotte previously, and being their previous bass player, Ethan has always been a friend of mine. To be asked to play, it was kind of a no-brainer. It was like, they're in my city. I'm at a point in my life and my career where hobby would be good for me, and we got a good practice spot. It's close to my work, and
that's awesome.
We write, and we've played a couple shows with Bal, and we play, and we have a show next weekend in Winston with a couple like doomy stoner bands. Should be really great. And
that's awesome.
I don't want to say there's no ambition with the band, because there is. Chad's very ambitious, and I don't know that we're going to hit the road and go on national tours, but we'd probably be interested in playing festivals and potentially long weekends, and whoever passes through Charlotte or we can jump on, because we are making a little bit of a go at it. And I will say, these guys I'm playing with are kind of like Bal. Like these are guys who've done this professionally and not for 20 years now. So
yeah, no, I get that.
Yeah, that's the boat I'm in. That's kind of the party band that I play with, the Finns on the weekends. All those guys come from that kind of background, original music bands, and kind of continuing to go that route. Of course, that's a little different than the original music, which is why we're here. But I want to, if you made it this far listening to this interview, firstly, thank you for caring enough to, about our band from a long time ago to listen in, and really to anybody who continues to listen to music that makes you feel something from a long time ago.
Yeah.
That there is something about that. So
Totally.
it's not lost on me, but it is remarkable to me, in some world in which we live, somebody likes the music that we make.
Absolutely.
That's very cool. So I can't thank you enough, Jeremy, for having us on to do this
awesome.
today.
Yeah, dude, I've really enjoyed this. This has been so cool. It's been a long time coming. Really appreciate number one, your friendship, both of you guys, and obviously the music that you've made over the years. It's impacted a lot of people. I really appreciate that as well, and I'm just really grateful that you guys came on and told me these awesome stories. And I know Joseph's told me some of this stuff over the years. Just as cool to hear it from a different perspective. So man, you guys are awesome, and I'm really grateful that you gave me this time.
We love you, brother. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
You're
man.
awesome.
Hey, let's
Jeremy.
get John Spartan to put the records out on vinyl. That'd be kind of cool.
Dude.
John.
I'm gonna hit him up anyway about this, but yeah, guys, you roll.
John would be a great interview if he ever does that kind of thing. And we didn't mention that, but when John left Tooth and Now, he started his own label, Spartan Records, who are a true player in the indie and vinyl scene right now.
Absolutely.
Crushing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We should say that.
Sick, dudes. Well, you rule. We'll talk soon, and hopefully get to hang out soon.
Love it, bro.
All right, bud. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
See you.
Hey, thank you to the listener again for tuning in, liking, subscribing, sharing, sending kind messages. I really appreciate it, guys. It's been so cool on this journey. Thank you to Jordan and Joseph Powers. Awesome conversation. So cool to reconnect and talk about your time in the bands, Far Less, Ball, of sinking ships. Just so cool to reconnect again, guys. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Got some incredible artists on the horizon, guys, and nostalgia, it's still a hell of a drug.